There's just one dimension of work performance that trumps all of the others. And that is... Oh, come on. You really think I was going to tell you before watching the video? You got to watch the whole thing. Let's do it. What's going on YouTube? Jamie Potter here, PhD in Organizational Behavior from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. My goal in this channel is to unlock the value of research for organizations. And with that in mind, today I'm talking to you about a very important topic, not only for organizations, but for leaders and managers, as well as employees who are impacted by it. And that is the idea of work performance. And to many people, work performance is sort of this black box single number you get, right? With performance management, maybe I was a 3 out of 5 at the end of the year, and 80% of the organization was, and that means I hit my target bonus. But beyond that, what does performance actually mean? Yes, a lot of organizations have their own sort of unique competency models, and sometimes the better organizations will actually give ratings on each of those for employees at the end of the year, which is helpful because it leads to developmental feedback. You're not just saying, hey, you need to be a 4 out of 5 next year on performance, but hey, you're actually lacking on this competency versus that, so you should put a lot of your training efforts and a lot of your efforts to be mentored by others into this competency versus that. So as always, I wanted to go to the research here to understand what did it have to say about work performance, and specifically the dimensions of work performance. In the initial study here that I found was from sort of a seminal study in 1990 from John Campbell, which looked at various dimensions and actually came out with 5 different dimensions of work performance that have since been subsumed by further sort of higher level categorizations. And in particular, the one that we still look at to this day breaks down into 2 higher level dimensions. And these are going to seem sort of obvious when you hear them, but they actually do break down a bit further into interesting, unique taxonomies. And these 2 high level dimensions are task performance and what's called contextual performance. So task performance is a bit obvious, right? It's the tasks that I do at work that are related to my job. It is, I filed the paperwork, I created the report, I did the presentation to management. Contextual performance is a bit more interesting though. That is the performance, as the word kind of suggests, in the broader context of the organization. Do I help out others even though it's not directly a part of my job description? Do I attend those after work events, or better yet, do I organize them because I realize it builds culture on the team and in the organization? This is that broader contextual performance. It's actually been called various things. One that's sort of colloquial and nice is, rather than task and contextual, what they call it is getting ahead or getting along. Breaking these 2 dimensions down further, that's what we really want, is this sort of next level of work performance dimensionalization. And that is what Dave Bartram did. He's of the former SHL group, which actually was taken over by CEB, which is a sort of broader talent management company, which was then taken over by Gartner, a broader sort of information services company. But Dave, in 2005, when he was a part of SHL, decided he wanted to look further into this idea and come up with sort of a taxonomy that subsumed everything else, a sort of mid-level taxonomy that he called the Great 8 Competencies. And what he wanted this to be was kind of the counterpoint to the Big 5 personality, which are predictors of various performance metrics at work. And he was saying, well, on the performance side, we don't have a taxonomy we all agree on. So I want to take on this Great 8 competency model and actually see what predictors, not only in the personality domain, but also motivation or cognitive style, actually relate to these great 8 competencies. But now the moment you've all been waiting for, what are these great 8 competencies? I want you to know I'm doing this from memory here. I do not have any notes. There are not cue cards behind the camera. So bear with me here. I'm going to do this from memory for you now.
Until the magician produces a rabbit from a hat, like that.
The first of the grade 8 competencies is leading and deciding. Exactly what it sounds like. You're able to make those decisions under ambiguity, actually be the one that says, here are the disparate pieces of information. This is the thing we need to do. Beyond that, sort of the flip side, supporting and cooperating. And it sort of relates to that contextual performance that I mentioned. Am I able to, at the right times, not lead and decide, but actually step back and support others who are leading and deciding, which is crucial in organizations. The next is interacting, presenting. Anyone that works, especially in a big company, knows a lot of your job is taken up in meetings or weekly presentations or monthly or biannual presentations. And it's a very important part of work to be able to do those well, not only communicate well, but with charisma, be sort of extroverted, etc. Next one is analyzing and interpreting. Again, are you able to create those reports? Are you able to go into Excel or SPSS or R and actually put the data together into some meaningful chart or graph for that presentation? The next one here is creating and conceptualizing. Are you able to come up with those great ideas that push the company forward? Are you able to be creative and unique, not just analyze and interpret data that exists, but sort of extrapolate it into the future such that I can come up with the next idea that helps our company grow? After this, we have adapting and coping. This is a really interesting one that I want to dig into further. But am I able to kind of roll with the punches as they come? Things change in organizations. We're seeing that right now. Things are changing on a level many of us have never seen in our lives. Are you able to sort of adapt and cope along the way with that? Next, organizing and executing. Again, as it sounds, am I able to keep everything together? Am I able to make that presentation well, bring in all the notes from all the previous meetings, and just generally stay organized in the very high level of complexity that is large organizations? Then there is enterprising and performing. This again is just, am I able to follow through with my goals? Am I able to get things done? Am I able to be ambitious and push forward regardless of the circumstances? I think I got them all. They might have been slightly out of order, but I think I nailed it. Thankfully, my memory from memorizing pi back in 7th grade served me well here. 3.14159653589979338847971693993710582097410582097494. I should mention before digging further into one of these components that Bartram did actually break these 8 competencies down into a further 210 different competency components. For the sake of the viewer and your time, I did not dig into each and every one of these. But if you'd like me to, please comment and I'll make like an hour or 2 long video where I go into each one. Bueller. That would be really dreadful though, especially even just fitting the various things on the screen here. I'd have to do really small font, but I'd be very happy to do that if people find that interesting. Of these 8 different competencies here, arguably the most important one is this adapting and coping. And I say that because even before the current situation where we're all needing to adapt on the fly to remote work and working with our families around and not really having clear boundaries between work life and home life, even before that, we were talking about the concept of future of work for a number of years and how jobs are shifting in such a way that the demands are that people are constantly learning new tasks and new processes, and arguably even will be expected over the next 30 years to fluidly move between different jobs throughout their career. Rather than just being, let's say, an engineer and growing in that path forever, maybe you'll be moving out to various other functional areas and doing that in a very fluid way. So this idea of adapting and coping has been around for some time as we've talked about future work, but it's taken on increasing importance now. And so interestingly enough, even before Bartram's 2005 study that really memorializes the grade 8 competencies, there had been studies of adaptive performance or adaptability at work and breaking that down into different dimensions, which again, I'm going to tell you these 8 dimensions from a 2000 study from memory. So bear with me here. So going through these, we have the first 2 are handling work emergencies and handling just everyday work stress. Interestingly enough, these were not hypothesized, and if you're actually reading through the study, there were only 6 that were hypothesized before they dug into the data, but these 2 were added on, and I always just find that interesting when hypotheses don't line up exactly with data, and the authors were very honest, to their credit, about that. The next one is learning new tasks, new skills, new processes. This to me is sort of the core one here. Am I able to constantly be adapting and learning and taking micro courses on the weekends to learn a new program that we're using at work? This is going to be increasingly important with this future of work and with the current situation. Next, there is dealing with uncertain or unpredictable events at work. You know, this may be your boss didn't show up, he or she was supposed to do the presentation, but now you have to. Are you just ready for that? And you can just jump in as necessary. Next one is solving problems creatively, solving unique problems that we haven't seen before, hence adapting. You know, am I able to just jump in and think of clever solutions or use past solutions that are, you know, analogous for this new problem here? Again, very key dimension of adaptive performance. Next one is interpersonal adaptability. That's the idea that I can meet new people or work with different people and just sort of understand who they are, use emotional intelligence to really understand how they're different and what the best way to work with them is across various tasks. And this is sort of related to a concept that's called self-monitoring in the literature. Am I able to see other people, understand them, and sort of change or adapt how I behave to make them comfortable and also work with them most effectively? A bit broader and higher level is now the cultural adaptability. Am I able to work with people of different cultures? There's a whole interesting literature on cross-cultural norms and values and how to work with people from different cultures, because often the values can be quite contrary to one another. And how do I not only learn those, but then learn to effectively work with people, especially if it's all within one group? You know, let's say we have 8 different world cultures represented in one group. Am I able to adapt my behavior and adapt my work style to work with people among all these different cultures? And lastly, sort of a niche one is adapting physical performance. Right? Am I able to do different things physically at work? A little less relevant for some jobs and more relevant for others, but alas, does round out these 8 subdimensions of adaptive performance here. So around the same time in 2000 as the one study on adaptive performance, breaking it down into its 8 subdimensions, was released, there was another study happening concurrently, led by Jeff Lapine, which really fascinating study, which looked at adaptive performance and what predicts adaptive performance. And it's so interesting because it took some of the characteristics that we know predict performance. We know from about a century of literature that predict performance, namely cognitive ability, as well as conscientiousness. They also added in openness to experience, because that kind of relates to adaptive performance. And they were seeing which of these predict adaptability, which is fascinating because we know they predict just general work performance, but they wanted to see, is there a distinction between the characteristics that predict just generic everyday work performance versus adaptive performance? And the way they also did this is quite clever. They brought in 73 undergrads to their lab, and they put them in this decision-making task. I believe it was about a 3-hour decision-making laboratory simulation. Normally you just run through this for 3 hours and you'd see how you perform, etc. But what they did is they threw a kind of change in the middle of it. They shifted how they determine performance. And so people that were in this lab, that were the participants that were taking part in this, actually had to really adapt their performance midway through. And this allowed the researchers as well to see who adapted best based on the characteristics that they had, namely their cognitive ability, their conscientiousness, and their openness to experience. And so they find some really fascinating things here as well. For one, that does show that adaptive performance is quite distinct from general work performance. For one, the obvious, they do show that people that have higher cognitive ability as well as higher openness to experience are better at just adapting, right? The people with cognitive ability, they can learn the new task quickly and then do well after the change. People with openness to experience, as the name suggests, are just kind of open to change. They even thrive on change in some way. So they also performed better after the change in this laboratory task. Interestingly, the authors predicted that conscientiousness would also lead to higher adaptive performance. But it actually resulted in the opposite. People that were more conscientious actually performed worse after the change. So it's contrary to hypotheses, and what the authors chalk this up to is actually, we're doing a lot of sub-dimensions here. Conscientiousness, although it seems like just I work hard, it actually breaks down into its own sub-dimensions, and there have been studies on these sub-dimensions. Namely, there are kind of two sub-dimensions of conscientiousness. There's dependability. Am I just there for people? Am I consistent, etc.? And then there's this other side, which is more achievement. Do I work really hard? Do I make sure I follow through? Do I make sure I hit my goals? So what they were basing this on, their hypotheses, was more on kind of the achievement subdimension. Conscientious people do well at work because they make sure they achieve. They work very hard to achieve. However, the dependability subdimension of conscientiousness actually can harm adaptive work performance because you become dependable and consistent. As the word suggests, you're consistent in what you do, which is great under most circumstances, but when things are changing, you actually need to be able to shift a bit more fluidly. And so conscientiousness, this rigid adherence to what's happening in the current moment, may actually be harmful, this study suggests, to your ability to adapt. All right, we learned a ton here. We took work performance. We initially broke it down into task and contextual performance. We then were able to break that down into the great 8 competencies, one of which is adaptive performance. We then broke down adaptive performance into its 8 subdimensions to understand what makes someone truly adaptable across a wide range of tasks at work. And then looking at the empirics behind adaptive performance, we were able to show this really interesting counterintuitive result that conscientiousness, while it predicts general work performance, may actually detract from adaptive work performance, namely because of that dependability that it results in. That consistency actually harms you in some way when things are changing quite fluidly at work. That is it for me. Please like the video, please subscribe here, check out my other videos. Also, I'm always open to comments if you want me to dig into something I talked about, or you just have a general work topic that you're interested in. I am happy to discuss that further and dig into the research. Until then, have a good weekend, and I'll see you next week.